I'm telling you, folks, right here, right now, if you want a great old-fashioned time in terms of finding a hilarious comedy to watch, this is the movie for you. Now, as far as not being a comedy in of itself, a good movie, I mean, come on. It's Sony. Do you really expect much? We're at the end of the year here. Are you really expecting much with this? I'm not.
And you will become a legend.
When the man comes around. When the man comes around.
Kraven the Hunter is directed by J.C. Chandor with a screenplay by Richard Wenk, art Marcum, and Matt Holloway, and a story by Richard Wenk. The film stars Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ariana DeBose, Fred Hechinger, Alessandro Nivola, Christopher Abbott, and Russell Crowe. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, Kraven's complex relationship with his father, Nikolai Kravenov, starts him down a path of vengeance with brutal consequences, motivating him to become not only the greatest hunter in the world, but also one of its most feared. Once again, Sony strikes yet again with another Spider-Man villain movie, and it's, how you say, a strike three. Alright, I'm just gonna get this out of the way. This movie is also bad. I don't know what you're expecting, folks. This is Sony. Like I said, you're not really expecting high quality here now, are you? And I gotta say, I congratulate you, Sony. I really do. You have made yet another terrible comic book movie close out this year. And you have now pumped out 3 of these movies, both of which are all bad. It's impressive. I gotta be honest with you. It's really impressive to see a company just pump out 3 movies in a year, and all of them just diminish after diminish after diminish. Shows how much Sony just sucks at this, okay? They really do suck at making films, but really particularly comic book movies. It may be better than Man Web, I'll give you that much. It is better than Man Web, but just barely. Alright? Barely is it surviving. It's almost like if you cut a bullet in half, here's the one half of the bullet. Yeah, the film still gets that bullet, alright? It just doesn't have the full bullet in it, it just gets half a bullet. I thought there were a few positives when I saw the movie, but after thinking about it, there's really only one positive that I have found with this movie, so here is the only positive that I can say. The action is decent. Having an R rating, it does help make the action sequences bloody and fun. And to be honest, and I am being honest, folks, I really am, it's the best action sequences in a Sony Spider-Man villain movie out there. Compared to the other movies, I will say the action here is the best out of them all, which is kind of funny to think about. And it's not really a high bar to cross. I mean, seriously, as much as I praise something like Let There Be Carnage's action, for the most part, I'm not going to sit here and say that all the action sequences in the series have been standouts. But in terms of choreography, I give this movie props, delivering on a fun but also bloody good time. But of course, this is the Sony Spider-Man villain universe, and it's just garbage. It's straight up bad. All across the board, it's terrible. So let's just now throw ourselves into the wolves' den. Let's just now go through the negatives here. The performances are really awful. Aside from Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I think, as much as I'm not crazy about him being Kraven, I'm not going to sit here and say that he wasn't terrible. There are times where he does look kind of bored, but I give him credit. He tries. He really puts up a good effort, as much as so many people could say that he's not Kraven. I give him the benefit of the doubt. He's trying. But Alessandro Nivola, fantastic. I think he's perfect. He is what fits this movie. And I feel like that's what everyone should be. Even Aaron Taylor Johnson to a degree, but really, he is the one that understands what he's in. He understands that this is some bullshit. He knows that he is not walking into anything that's going to be good. So it's almost like he read the script, he's like, alright, I could phone this in. I could do it just to get a paycheck, but I'm gonna do this by dialing it up ever so slightly each time. And every time he is in this movie, without a doubt, he is always hilarious. And he fits the criteria of what this movie, but also this universe, has been missing throughout its entire existence. And they are the only things that are keeping it together because everyone else performs like this is their first film. Poor Ariana DeBose. This is an Oscar-winning actress, Oscar winner, and you have her saying some of the worst dialogue. And I don't know who to blame. And listen, I'm not trying to be rude and say that she's the one to blame for all this, but I'm also going to say that her delivery is not really helping this movie, and it just sucks that she's given the worst dialogue. But I'm just saying she's not really doing this movie any favors. And for Russell Crowe, and I gotta say this because for those who don't know, Russell Crowe, when Man Web came out, was talking shit to Dakota Johnson about her being in that movie and saying that she should have known what she was in. Let me ask you, sir, you also got no excuse, alright? You are an Oscar winner over her. You should know better. You should know what you are in. And half the time, or I should say most of the time, you look bored as shit. You really do. I praised him in Gladiator, but here, he looks so uninterested and so bored that I could tell you he is phoning it. At least with Dakota Johnson, I can get behind her reasonings as to why she wasn't fully into it. Russell Crowe, he has had a career longer than Dakota Johnson. And for him to talk shit to her about her being in that movie, which, by the way, I am not excusing the performance that movie gives off. And as much as, bless Dakota Johnson's heart, she tries, but she does not work well. But that is also because of the line she is given. But to Russell Crowe to act like, well, I know what I'm in. I know I could do much better than that. No, you can't because you're really bad in this and you just come off as you don't want to do this at all. You look pretty much bored throughout this entire film. Direction is frantic. Director J.C. Chandor struggles with handling Kraven's story and making it bland. Aside from the action, he makes it boring. There's nothing about his direction in this movie that stands out, and I don't know if I really want to blame him wholly because you could look at the other direction on most of the other movies. The only one I can say that I would discount is probably like Let There Be Carnage, because that one Andy Serkis tried. I actually truly believe that he tried the most with regards to trying to be a little bit like how the comics are. But most of the movies that have come out from these directors, I don't feel like that's their vision. I don't think that their style that they have probably proven in the past does not apply here. Because none of them stand out. And J.C. Chandor, he has done some work before, and seeing him do what he does in this movie, I don't feel like he has a voice. I don't feel like he has the energy. It just almost feels like he was just doing a bunch of checklist things that he wanted to do for Sony. And I'm not saying that that's his fault, but again, I don't know. All I could say, though, is that it just feels like other Sony Spider-Man villain universe films that I have seen from these directors. And to me, I just don't feel like his voice shines. It just kind of feels like it is overtaken by a studio. The visuals are horrible. Anytime any CGI is used, it's not only noticeable, but it looks straight up bad. Bad all around. Once it gets to the end, it's just a big, overblown CGI fight with Kraven and the Rhino. And as much as it was enjoyable, I'm not going to deny, though, it is just a CGI-fested fight. That's all it is. And it looks straight up bad. It looks like something that is from the early 2000s. Just like the other Sony Spider-Verse villain movies. They all look like they are straight up from the 2000s. And it's embarrassing to see, as much as Sony has all this money, it don't do shit in terms of the look of this film. The writing is hilarious. Writers Richard Wenk, Art Marcum, and Matt Holloway make a script that's terrible, but it's just so unintentionally fun. Alright, it is, by God, a comedy. This has to be one of the most unintentional comedy movies I have seen this year. It's impressive to me on how much the writing in this movie sometimes came off as generic, bland, but also just hilariously bad. Anytime an actor gave their lines out, I was just sitting there laughing. I was with a friend. We were both laughing throughout this movie in the sort of dialogue that was being said. And the AER that was used in this movie is also straight up bad. It's terrible. But I could give the writers credit for this. You gave me a comedy that I love, so thank you. I appreciate that. But in terms of if you were looking for something serious, Ivy, I'm sorry, you failed in that regard. I hate to be rude, but I gotta be honest, it's pretty bad. The story is generic, following Kraven, not really being the character from the comics, because I have friends who know who Kraven is, and learning about Kraven myself, and then playing the Marvel Spider-Man 2 game, which, by the way, has a better Kraven than this movie, just made for a stale and lifeless film. Again, Sony has no idea what they are doing with this IP. And it baffles me time and time again that Sony just continues to go through this barrage of films that they think is bigger than Spider-Man. You know good and goddamn well that nobody's gonna beat Spider-Man, okay, as a film. You honestly did think that these movies were going to be bigger than the Spider-Man movies that came out under Marvel? Nice try. That's never gonna happen. Spider-Man is bigger than all of them. There's a reason why these characters are popular is because of Spider-Man. Maybe Venom is an exception, but for the most part, most of these characters, they don't come close to what Spider-Man brings in terms of draw. And they are the only reason why they are successful is because of Spider-Man. And if you're telling me that a story like this could get people to get behind Kraven, I'm sorry, you just made even more Spider-Man fans pissed off of ruining a character that people actually really like. The production is a mess. You can tell from the behind the scenes that it felt mishandled and frantic, throwing in the noticeable reshoots and changes even more apparent that Sony mismanages their productions on these movies. And listen, I understand movies go through reshoots. I understand that completely. Everyone knows that. But when it's so noticeable in most of their movies, it's baffling. Most of their movies that you can see throughout this entire series is very noticeable that the production behind this feels like it was mismanaged, misused, and you just kind of feel bad for a lot of the people that were working underneath them because, boy, a lot of these people are probably talented. I really believe that. I think any production crew is talented, and I think this is all on Sony's doing in terms of how this was all handled. The cinematography is dull. Cinematographer Ben Davis shoots a lifeless and shaky film that doesn't keep things steady. Nothing exciting stands out in this movie. There is not one shot, one frame that I can sit there and I will remember. I will walk away from this movie being like, man, that just felt like what most of the other camera work is like in most of the other Sony Spider-Man villain films. Just lifeless and boring. There's nothing to it. There's no character to it. It just all feels like they are all the same type of looking films, and it just frustrates me because there's a lot of talented people involved, and the fact that they underutilize their talent in terms of their craft, that is appalling to me. The editing is inconsistent throughout. The editing is choppy and jarring as the movie goes along. It all feels poorly put together. This movie could come apart so easily. It's almost like you could just pull one string off of the editing and everything would just flim apart. And it's funny to me on how they still try to get through by using choppy editing. You know is a bad sign when you have to chop this much with regards to the action sequences, and also some of the sped up in this movie, or even when the visual effects are applied to it with the editing, it looks terrible. It looks laughably bad. The pacing and runtime is drawn out. The more the scenes go on for, the more the film is padded out. With a runtime of 2 hours and 7 minutes, this had no right of being 2 hours. Not even at all. I would even say that this barely counts for like an hour and 40. I think this should be really an hour and 30. And the fact that they try to justify that 2 hour runtime is bullshit, if you ask me. Sony's just screwing with you. Let's just be serious with that. Just like the previous films, Kraven the Hunter is another stinker by Sony to hold onto the Spider-Man rights. At the end of the day, this is all they know what to do, which is we just need to hold on to these rights as long as we can, and good God, we're going to do everything in our power to do that. Hopefully, with the film being terribly received, both critically and financially, and Sony just focusing on Spider-Man at the moment, maybe we can hold off for any more of these awful films. I thought that they were completely going to be like, alright, we're scrapping these, but now it's been told that they are not scrapping them and that they're actually going to redo this. No, just stop. Just stop doing this. And the fact that the CEO of Sony just came out and said how it was not only critics' faults, which, by the way, you're welcome. I know I'm not like a verified critic, but I'll take it. I'll take the compliment. Thank you. I'm glad to have called out your movies for being terrible as they are. But you're also saying that these movies are not bad. Yeah, that's another way of putting it. Or better yet, I never watched these movies. I just, said these things so that way I can keep my job, which you should lose. I hate to sound rude when I say this, but when you're the CEO of a movie company, that's embarrassing. It's appalling to see somebody like that be at the top and just acting like this is terrible, that people are calling their movies bad. Because they are. Maybe there's some people who like these, but let's face it, these are bad movies. All across the board, a lot of people don't like these movies. But, however, Sony will be Sony. They'll never learn. They'll just keep on doing this until they'll somehow lose the rights in some way, which, by the way, I still think they should. If you ask me, I know a lot of people don't like that, and the fact that if it goes back to Marvel, it's under Disney, but people, look at what they've given us. Spider-Man fans deserve better, and they deserve to be happy, and for them to suffer under the hands of Sony, it's appalling and it's embarrassing to see a fan base having to go through as much shit as any other fan base as of recently. So I am giving Kraven the Hunter a 1 out of 10. This is garbage. This is terrible. Sony, just stop. I beg of you. Come to your senses, realize that this was a mistake, just focus on Spider-Man, and don't touch anything. Let the professionals come in and clean up this mess and do something with it instead of you. You completely still don't get it. You'll never understand. Again, Avi Arad, please retire, because I bet you most fans want you gone. They don't want you here anymore. Your time has passed. Leave, sir. So now I'll be doing my review for the Lord of the Rings anime and then soon the Sonic movies leading up to Sonic 3. So yes, look forward to those reviews and other movie TV show reviews coming soon.